students, welcome back. I hope you're having a fantastic week. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, we all know Mr. Mathews will be talking. I'll be talking a lot. You guys probably remember this from me being in class, just me rambling on and on and on. I just get really excited to tell you guys about all the things I'm thinking about. Because of that, I haven't really been able to give you a whole lot of updates on what I've been up to. So I'm going to take just a second just to kind of give you a little update. I found a way to keep myself busy by riding my bike, by listening to records, by playing guitar. I'm so bored. Yeah, I'm so dang bored. And by reading. This has given me a lot of time to get a lot of reading done. I finally finished. If you like Lord of the Rings, this is kind of the backstory. This book was like just so it's one of my favorite authors, so what have you been up to? What have you guys been doing? Any cool projects? I know Silas out there recently sent me some really cool pictures of some awesome projects that he's been doing. They're having a great time at home. I know a lot of you have been doing a lot of cool stuff too. And I've seen a lot of you have been commenting on Miss Carson's Google Classroom and interacting with me in Google Classroom, which has been so great. So I just hope you're finding ways to stay busy, have fun. Last week, our challenge question had to do with a state that was formed because it broke off from Virginia. Virginia used to be much bigger in terms of its official territory, and so the question was, what was the name of that newly formed state? When Virginia decided that it wanted to secede, along with some of the other southern states, this particular portion broke off and formed a new state. Luca, Avonlea, Zaid, and Fareed came in hot with the correct answer, which is West Virginia. Citizens living in western counties of Virginia did disagree about whether they should secede or break away from the Union, which was the formal name for the United States during that time. And they disagreed on a lot of issues regarding voting rights, taxes, but most divisively, slavery. So this led to the formation of West Virginia, which of course is still a state today. Thank you so much for participating, Luca, Avonlea, Zaid, and Fareed. Happy to see some new voices on these videos as well. Keep it up. Let's go ahead and jump into Week 8. Week 8 jumps into some of the major battles of the Civil War, and the reason why your text selected these battles is because of their significance or importance to the war. Obviously, the Civil War raged across numerous states. It featured numerous leaders, lots of generals. We're just taking a look at some of those. Now, for your first two learning experiences, you were tasked with creating a timeline of the selected battles. And your timeline was supposed to feature the date of the battle, a symbol or picture that represents something about that battle, and one sentence about why that battle was important. So instead of me just giving you the answers, this is something that you really could do just by doing your text. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of these four major events that we were looking at. Let's take a look. So the first battle that is described in your text is the attack on Fort Sumter. And this was really not so much a battle as it was just an attack, a siege on the fort. And I think it's important for us to begin by understanding what Fort Sumter was and what exactly happened. Fort Sumter was constructed slowly in bits and pieces between 1829 and 1860. Even on the date of its Civil War debut, its full construction wasn't entirely complete. So here's a little bit of background on this. After the War of 1812, which was a second war between Great Britain and the United States realized that they had a major weak spot. Great Britain possessed one of the strongest navies in the entire world at that point, which meant that Great Britain's primary form of attack would occur in the ocean or on the coastlines of the United States. And what the U.S. realized was that their coastlines were really vulnerable to attack. So Congress decided to start building a system of forts to protect the coast, to protect the American harbors, to protect the shipyards, etc. Fort Sumter was named after a Revolutionary War hero named Thomas Sumter, and it was built in the Charleston Harbor of South Carolina. Now, remember, South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union and form the Confederate States of America. So, in the minds of the South Carolina government, Fort Sumter belonged to the Confederacy. Now, President Lincoln took a hard stance against the secession of Confederate states, and he refused to give up Fort Sumter, which would mean pulling the Union troops and workers at the fort out and allowing the Confederacy to officially take over the fort. Lincoln sends an unarmed supply ship to Fort Sumter. That doesn't seem like a very big deal, does it? But what it signaled to the Confederacy was that Lincoln was refusing to give the fort up, even if he wasn't using violent force to keep it. The Confederacy used this as justification to launch an attack on the fort, an attack which lasted about 34 hours. And believe it or not, no one died during the actual battle. But the Union forces were so largely outnumbered that they had to surrender the fort to the Confederacy. And this show of force lit the fuse that would ignite the Civil War. A few months later, the first official battle of the war takes place, and this is known as the First Battle of Bull Run. It's also sometimes known as the Battle of Manassas. Manassas is the actual place where it was fought. The battle took place on July 21st, 1861, about 3 months after the attack on Fort Sumter. When the battle first began, the Union Army greatly outnumbered the Confederate Army by about 13,000 troops. Some estimates say as many as 15,000 troops. And this made it seem like the Union would be able to claim an easy victory. Lincoln, and, well, everyone else I suppose, only was okay with using violent force because he was confident that the Union could win this war very quickly and very easily. Now, the importance of this battle is that it previewed just how long, hard, and costly this war was going to be. Union troops did outnumber the Confederate troops at first, but more Confederate troops did show up to reinforce the Confederate Army, and that eventually led them to push through the Union lines and send the Union into a retreat. This demonstrated that the Confederate Army was a stronger force to reckon with than what the Unioners had initially thought. One interesting fact about the battle was the introduction of a Confederate war cry known as the Rebel Yell. Ambrose Pierce, a lieutenant in the Union Army, said in his diary, "It was the ugliest sound ever heard by mortal man." This war cry was much different from the traditional hurrah or huzzah that was pretty traditional in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and it was a war cry for the Union troops often. It terrified the Union troops, especially on battlefields that were covered in smoke from cannons and guns. And interestingly enough, there's actually a roller coaster at King's Dominion named the Rebel Yell, and it's named after this tradition. So if you're trying to think of what this Rebel Yell might have sounded like, just imagine a mixture of people screaming on a roller coaster, except multiply that by about 10,000, and imagine that the people are angry and shouting and have weapons and are running toward you. I think I'd be pretty terrified too. This proved that this was going to be a very long and deadly war, one of the deadliest in American history, in fact. Now, in between this, there were lots of battles, a lot of battles taking place, and many of those battles were being won by the Confederate troops. That is until a turning point happened. In 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg was fought. And this was the deadliest battle of the Civil War, with a death toll of over 50,000 people. And this is including the death toll from both Union and Confederate troops. In 1863, Union troops had chased Confederate troops until they met in a battle in a town called Gettysburg. And this was a decisive victory for the Union and a turning point for the war. And, fun fact, the battle was actually won on the 4th of July. President Lincoln would later visit Gettysburg to give a speech as they were commemorating that battleground. And it was not only one of his most influential and memorable speeches, it was one of the most significant speeches in all of American history, despite the fact that he spoke for less than 2 minutes. Now, for reference, the speaker who spoke before him spoke for a grueling 2 hours. If you think I talk a lot, just be glad I'm not that guy. Lincoln only spoke for about less than 2 minutes. It was a very short speech, but it was very powerful. In it, he said, "From these honored dead, we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we are here highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish. Now, the final official terms of surrender were agreed upon at the McLean House in Virginia in a town called Appomattox Courthouse. Yes, the town was actually named Appomattox Courthouse. It was not a courthouse in Appomattox. Now, Confederate General Robert E. Lee and Union General Ulysses S. Grant discussed the terms and signed the legal documents on April 9th, 1865. Now that brings us to learning experience number 3. Take a look at my answer key here and compare it with yours. I'll give you some time. Alright, this week's comment challenge is going to be a tricky one. It's going to require some research, and the research isn't in your packet, so you might have to use the internet or talk to some experts about this. But here's my question. True or false? The end of the Civil War was also the end of slavery in the United States. True or false? I'll answer this comment challenge in our bonus video, Slavery, Secession, and States' Rights, which is going to be released this coming Monday. So stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Hey, if you're in touch with your friends, other 4th grade students from Bayview, let them know to check out our videos if they haven't already. And if you have any other friends that you're friends with from other schools from different grades, they can check out our videos too. Don't just send them a link and have them check it out. I hope that you're all staying safe, that you're all staying healthy, and that you're finding ways to not get too bored during all of this. Take care, everyone. Can't wait to talk to you again.